still remember the taste of copper dust in my mouth from that morning. It never really goes away, even now. Some flavors stick with you longer than the memories themselves. I had been working the cold water site for about 8 months when it happened. Not long enough to know better, but long enough to stop asking questions. That is how most accidents happen, I think. You get comfortable, you start trusting the routine. The site was a copper extraction operation about 40 miles outside of Reno. Small crew, maybe 20 of us on rotation. The company called it a boutique operation, which was just another way of saying they cut corners everywhere they could. We knew it. We joked about it during breaks. But the pay was decent and the work was steady, so we showed up every day and descended into that hole in the ground like it was normal. My shift started at 6. I rode down with Marcus and Joelle in the main cage. The descent took about 4 minutes. You could feel the temperature drop as we went deeper. By the time we reached level 3, where we were working that week, it was cold enough to see your breath. The tunnels at level 3 were newer. They had been cut 6 months prior, pushing further into a vein that the geologists swore was rich. The supports looked solid enough. Steel beams every 10 feet, mesh bolting on the ceiling, drainage channels cut into the floor. Everything by the book, or at least by the version of the book that kept costs down. We spread out to our stations. I was on drill duty that day, which meant working about 200 feet from the main junction. We knew the drill was older than I was, probably, but it did the job. Loud as hell. You wore double ear protection and still went home with ringing in your skull. I had been working for maybe an hour when I felt the first tremor. It was subtle. Just a vibration through the floor that made the drill bit skip half an inch to the left. I stopped, pulled my ear protection down, and listened. Nothing. Just the distant sound of machinery and the drip of water somewhere in the dark. I went back to work. The second tremor came 10 minutes later. Stronger this time. Dust fell from the ceiling in thin streams, caught in the beam of my headlamp like snow. I shut the drill off completely and stepped back from the wall. That is when I heard Marcus shouting. His voice was distorted by distance and echo, but I could make out enough, whereas he was telling everyone to get back to the junction. To move now. I did not hesitate. I left the drill where it stood and started back toward the main tunnel. My headlamp bounced with each step, throwing shadows that stretched and collapsed against the rock. I could hear other footsteps now, other voices calling out in the dark. I was maybe 50 feet from the junction when the mountain moved. It was not like an earthquake. It was deeper than that. More fundamental, like the earth itself had decided to shift its weight, and everything we'd carved into it was suddenly irrelevant. The sound came first. A grinding roar that started somewhere above and behind me, building in volume until it drowned out everything else. Then the air pressure changed. I felt it in my ears, a sharp pop that made my eyes water. Then the world came down. I do not remember falling. I remember being on my feet one moment and then on my hands and knees the next, coughing into dust so thick I could not see my own fingers. The noise continued for what felt like minutes, but was probably only seconds. Rock hitting rock. Metal tearing. The wet sound of earth settling into new positions. When it finally stopped, the silence was worse. I pushed myself up slowly. My headlamp was still working, barely. The lens was cracked, and the beam was weak. But it was enough to see that the tunnel behind me no longer existed. Where there had been open space, There was now a wall of collapsed rock and timber. Solid. Complete. Like it had always been that way. I turned around, searching for the junction. The dust was starting to settle, revealing shapes in the darkness. I saw Joelle first. She was sitting against the wall, her face gray with dust, blood running from a cut above her left eye. She looked at me but did not say anything. Marcus was there too, and Chen, and Travis. 5 of us total. The others had been on the far side of the collapse. Either they made it out or they did not. We had no way of knowing. Travis tried his radio first. He clicked it on and called for surface. Static. He tried again, more static. He switched channels, went through every frequency we were supposed to monitor. Nothing but white noise, and the occasional pop of interference. Could be the repeater, he said, but his voice suggested he did not believe it. Might have gotten buried in the fall. Chen was already examining the collapse. He ran his hand along the new wall of debris, testing its stability. Small pieces crumbled under his touch, but the mass of it did not move. How much air do we have? Joelle asked. It was the question we were all thinking, the one that mattered more than anything else. Marcus did the math out loud. This section is about 1,200 square feet. Ceiling height maybe 7 feet average. Call it 8,000 cubic feet of space. He paused. 5 people. If we stay calm and do not move around too much, maybe 18 hours. Maybe 20 if we are lucky. They will dig us out before then, Travis said. He said it too quickly, too firmly. Nobody responded. We settled into positions along the wall, spacing ourselves out to conserve heat and air. Chen kept working at the collapse, carefully removing smaller rocks and trying to find a gap we could exploit. But for every stone he moved, 2 more seemed to shift down into the space. After an hour, he gave up and joined us against the wall. That is when the waiting started. Time moves differently in the dark. Without natural light or any reference point, minutes stretch into hours and hours collapse into moments. We tried to stay quiet, to keep our breathing shallow. We took turns trying the radio. Always the same result. Static. After what felt like 6 hours but might have been 3, we started hearing sounds from the other side of the collapse. At first, it was just scraping. Rhythmic. Deliberate. Someone was digging. We all heard it. We sat up straighter, pressed our ears against the rock, tried to gauge how far away it was. Where are you watching from, and are you watching alone? Subscribe and stay. They are coming, Travis whispered. They are actually coming. We listened for another 20 minutes. The scraping continued, then stopped. We waited for it to resume. It did not. Maybe they are bringing in heavier equipment, Joelle said. But I saw the look on Marcus's face. He knew what I was starting to suspect. The sound was not coming from the direction of the surface. It was coming from deeper in the mine, from sections that should have been empty. Could be another crew, Chen offered. Could have been working lower levels and are trying to dig up. Marcus shook his head slowly. There is no one on the lower levels. The whole site is on level 3 this week. Budget cuts. We sat with that for a while. The air was getting worse. You could feel it in your chest. Each breath required more effort than the last. We were all breathing through our mouths now. You're trying to pull in more oxygen with each intake. Travis started coughing around what I guessed was hour 10. Wet, heavy coughs that echoed off the stone. He tried to suppress them, but that only made it worse. Eventually he gave up and let them come. The sound filled the tunnel, bouncing back at us from every direction. That is when we heard the voices. Not from the radio, from beyond the collapse. Distant and muffled, but definitely voices. Multiple people, talking or shouting. The words were indistinct, but the rhythm was human. Chen stood up, nearly stumbling in his eagerness. He pressed himself against the rock wall and shouted, "We are here. 5 of us, can you hear me?" We waited. The voices continued, but they did not change. They did not get closer or louder. They just went on in that same muffled cadence, exact like a conversation happening in another room. "They cannot hear us," Joel said quietly. Chen shouted again anyway, louder this time. His voice cracked with the effort. He beat his fist against the rock, 3 heavy impacts that sent dust falling from above. The voices stopped. We held our breath listening. Then they started again. But this time they were closer. And this time I could almost make out words. Almost. Marcus grabbed Chen's arm. "Stop making noise." "Why? They are right there. They can help us." "Those are not rescue workers." "How do you know?" Marcus did not answer. He did not have to. We could all hear it now. The voices were wrong. The cadence was off. Too slow. Too deliberate. Like someone trying to remember how human speech works. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. It's the kind of cold that has nothing to do with temperature. We sat in silence for the next hour. The voices continued sporadically, sometimes close, sometimes distant, never quite making sense, never quite stopping. Travis's coughing got worse. He was struggling now, each breath a conscious effort. His lips were turning blue in the dim light of our headlamps. We were all feeling it. The headache behind the eyes, the sluggish thoughts. The air was running out faster than Marcus had calculated. "We need to try digging out ourselves," Chen said. His words were slurred slightly. Hypoxia setting in. "We will bring more down," Marcus replied. But even he sounded uncertain now. Joelle had not spoken in over an hour. She was sitting with her knees pulled up to her chest, staring at nothing. When I touched her shoulder, she barely reacted. My headlamp dimmed, flickered, and went dark. Travis's died a few minutes later. We were down to 3 working lights and they were all fading. That is when the scratching started. Not scraping like before. Scratching, like fingernails on stone, coming from multiple points along the collapse, rhythmic and patient and absolutely deliberate. "What is that?" Chen's voice was barely a whisper. None of us answered because we did not know, or maybe because we did and could not bring ourselves to say it out loud. The scratching continued for hours. Sometimes it would stop for long stretches and we would think it was over. Then it would start again. Closer. Always closer. Travis stopped breathing first. One moment he was coughing, and the next, he just went still. We knew because the sound of his struggles simply ceased. Nobody checked on him, and we did not have the energy. We barely had the air. I must have passed out at some point, because I woke to complete darkness. All the headlamps had died. I could hear breathing nearby, shallow and ragged. 2 people, maybe 3. The scratching had stopped. In its place was something worse. Silence. Complete and total. The kind of silence that presses against your eardrums and makes you question whether you still exist. Then I heard movement. Not from beyond the collapse. From inside the tunnel with us. Slow, shuffling footsteps. The scrape of fabric against stone. "Marcus?" I tried to say, but my voice came out as barely a whisper. The footsteps stopped, I held my breath, which was not difficult considering how little air there was left. I strained my eyes against the darkness, trying to see anything. Shapes, movement, something. A hand touched my shoulder. I jerked away, my back hitting the wall. "Who is that?" No response, just breathing, close enough that I could feel the warmth of it on my face. Then a voice, quiet and careful and completely wrong. "They are not coming for us." It was Travis's voice, but Travis was dead. I had heard him stop breathing hours ago. I scrambled sideways along the wall, my hands scraping against rock. I hit something soft, a body. I could not tell whose. They were not moving. "We need to dig," the voice continued, still Travis, still wrong. "We need to dig deeper. That is where the air is, down below, in the old sections." I found the strength to speak. "There is no air down there. The lower levels have been sealed for years." "Then how did I get back up here?" I did not have an answer for that. I did not want an answer for that. I kept moving, crawling now, my hands and knees scraping across the rough floor. I needed to get away from that voice, from whatever was using Travis's voice, from the truth of what was happening in this tunnel. My hand landed on something metal, cool and familiar. The drill. I had somehow crawled all the way back to where I had been working when the collapse started. The voice followed me. I could hear it shuffling through the darkness, getting closer. "You cannot leave," it said. "None of us can leave. They sealed us in. They always seal us in. That is how it works. That is how it has always worked." I fumbled with the drill, trying to remember the controls. My fingers were numb. My thoughts were fragmenting. But I managed to find the power switch. Nothing happened. Of course nothing happened. The power lines had been severed in the collapse. The drill was dead. Everything was dead. I slumped against the wall, the metal drill bit still in my hands. Not a tool anymore, just weight. The footsteps were right in front of me now. I could smell something. Copper and earth and something underneath that I did not want to identify. "It is better this way," the voice said. "Better to stay, better to wait. Others will come. They always send more, and we will be here. We will always be here." I do not remember what happened next. I think I passed out again. Or maybe I died. Maybe there is not much a difference when you are that far gone. What I do remember is waking up, not in the tunnel, in a hospital room, bright lights, clean air, the sound of machines beeping steadily. They told me I was the only survivor, and they found me after 48 hours of digging, unconscious but alive, severe hypoxia, dehydration, exposure but alive. They found the others too. Marcus, Chen, Joel, Travis, all dead. Asphyxiation, exactly what you would expect. The company paid for my medical bills, gave me a settlement, made me sign papers that said I would not talk about what happened. I signed, I took the money, I tried to move on, but sometimes late at night when the world is quiet, I hear scratching. Not from outside my window or in the walls, from somewhere deeper, somewhere below. And I wonder if I really did wake up, or if I am still down there in the dark, listening to voices that should not exist, waiting for a rescue that will never come. I wonder if any of us really leave the places that break us, or if we just learn to pretend. The thing about offshore drilling platforms is that they are fundamentally unnatural. You are working on a man-made island in the middle of an ocean that would kill you in minutes if you fell in. Everything is metal and machinery and noise, balanced on stilts driven into the seabed hundreds of feet below. It should not work, but it does. right up until it does not. I worked on the Titan 7 platform for 3 years. It was positioned about 90 miles off the coast of Alaska, drilling for natural gas deposits in the continental shelf. The platform housed 86 people at full capacity: engineers, roughnecks, support staff, management. We rotated in 4-week shifts, 4 weeks on, 2 weeks off. You learn to live with the same faces, the same routines, in the same endless sound of machinery grinding against the earth. The platform had been in operation for 12 years when I joined the crew. That is ancient for offshore work. Most platforms get decommissioned after 10, but the company kept finding reasons to extend operations. New deposits, more efficient extraction methods, better profit margins. The usual justifications for ignoring safety protocols. We all knew the rig was running on borrowed time. You could feel it in the way the structure swayed in heavy seas. More than it should. You could hear it in the groaning of metal during storm systems. You could see it in the rust that maintenance never quite managed to stay ahead of. But the pay was excellent. Hazard bonus plus isolation pay plus overtime. While I was clearing 6 figures a year for work that was mostly standing around monitoring gauges and running diagnostics. Easy money, as long as you did not think too hard about what you were standing on. The incident started on day 19 of my rotation. We were in the middle of a routine extraction when the pressure reading started climbing. I was in the control room when the first alarm went off. Just a yellow warning light on panel 6. Nothing critical. Pressure in drill shaft delta was reading 15% above optimal, well within tolerances but worth monitoring. Yuri was the shift supervisor that day. He glanced at the reading, made a note in the log, and told me to run a diagnostic on the sensor. Probably just a calibration drift, he said. I ran the diagnostic. The sensor checked out fine, which meant the pressure reading was accurate. I reported back to Yuri. He frowned, pulled up the historical data, and compared it to the current readings. Bump the relief valve, he said. Bleed off some pressure, should stabilize. I opened the relief valve remotely. The pressure dropped by 3%, then immediately started climbing again, faster this time. Yuri picked up the radio and called down to the drill floor. Need someone to eyeball delta shaft. Pressure is running hot. The response came back 30 seconds later. Visual is clear. No leaks, no obvious blockage, all nominal. But the pressure kept climbing. 20% above optimal. 25, 30. At 32%, the red alarm kicked in. A sharp, pulsing tone that filled the control room. IRTC protocol said we should shut down the shaft entirely at that point. Pull the drill, seal the well, and investigate before resuming operations. Yuri hesitated. Shutting down meant losing an entire day of production, maybe more. It meant explaining to management why we pulled the plug on a well that was technically still within safe operating ranges. Give it 5 more minutes, he said. If it does not stabilize, we shut it down. I should have argued. I should have insisted. But I did not. Because I'd been on that platform for 3 years, and I had seen this same scenario play out a dozen times. Management always pushed back, always wanted 1 more hour, 1 more shift, 1 more day before shutting down profitable operations. So I watched the numbers climb and told myself it would be fine. At 40% above optimal, the drill shaft ruptured. I did not see it happen. I was staring at the monitor when the readings suddenly flatlined. Every gauge on panel 6 dropped to 0 simultaneously. Then the entire platform shuddered. It was not like the collapse at Coldwater. That had been earth moving. This was different. This was metal failing. Steel designed to withstand thousands of pounds of pressure suddenly giving way. The sound was like a rifle shot, sharp and final, followed by a deeper rumble as something heavy hit the ocean floor far below. Yuri grabbed the radio. "All stations, report status." The responses came in chaotic and overlapping. Delta drill floor reporting breach. East support strut showing structural damage. Lower deck flooding. Casualty count unknown. The platform tilted, not much. Maybe 2 degrees. But when you are standing on a structure balanced on pylons in the middle of the ocean, 2 degrees feels like falling. Emergency protocols kicked in automatically. Klaxons blaring. Red lights flashing. The automated system started its shutdown sequence, closing valves and securing wells across the entire platform. Yuri activated the platform-wide intercom. His voice was steady, almost bored. Years of training taking over. "All personnel, this is not a drill. Proceed to muster stations. Repeat, proceed to muster stations. Prepare for possible evacuation." I followed him out of the control room. The corridor was already filling with people, moving with practiced efficiency toward their designated assembly points. No panic. Just the calm, organized movement of professionals who had drilled this scenario 100 times. We reached the main deck and I got my first look at the damage. The Delta drill shaft housing had torn free from its moorings. The entire structure, 30 feet of reinforced steel and machinery, had collapsed into the ocean. Where it had been attached to the platform, there was now a jagged hole about 15 feet across. I could see straight through to the water below, gray and churning with debris. But it was the tilt that worried me more. The platform was definitely listing now. 3 degrees, maybe 4. Enough that you had to adjust your balance while walking. Enough that unsecured objects were starting to slide. The evacuation boats were already being prepped. 2 lifeboats, each rated for 50 people. More than enough for our crew of 86. Its standard procedure was to get everyone off the platform and wait for the support vessels to arrive. They would assess the damage and determine whether the platform could be stabilized or if it needed to be abandoned permanently. The muster count came up short. 83 people accounted for, 3 missing. 2 riggers who had been working on the Delta drill floor when the shaft failed. 1 engineer who had been running diagnostics in the lower mechanical level. The platform captain made the call immediately. "Launch both boats. Get everyone clear. Once you are safe, we circle back for search and rescue." "We do not leave people behind," someone said. I think it was Dmitri, one of the senior engineers. "We do not risk 83 lives for 3 unknowns," the captain replied. His voice was hard, final. "Into the boats, as now." The loading was orderly, practiced. We had drilled this too many times to screw it up even under pressure. I was in the second boat near the back. As we lowered toward the water, I kept my eyes on the platform. The tilt was getting worse. 5 degrees now, maybe 6. The first lifeboat hit the water and detached from the cables. Its engine started immediately, a rough diesel growl that carried across the waves. It began moving away from the platform, putting distance between itself and the failing structure. Our boat followed 30 seconds later. The descent was smooth until we were about 10 feet from the water. Then the cable on the stern winch started slipping. boat tilted backward sharply. People grabbed for handholds. Someone screamed. The cable caught, jerked, and held. The boat leveled out and hit the water hard but intact. The operator fired the engine. It coughed, sputtered, and caught. We started moving away from the platform. That is when I saw the figure on the lower deck. It was one of the missing riggers. I recognized his orange safety vest. He was stumbling out of the damaged section, one hand pressed against the wall for balance. His face was covered in blood. I shouted and pointed. Others saw him too. The boat operator grabbed the radio and called to the platform captain. "We have visual on one of the missing. Lower deck, port side. He is mobile." The response was immediate. "Bring your boat around. Pick him up." The operator turned the boat hard, fighting against the swell. We came back alongside the platform. The rigger had made it to the railing. He was leaning over, waving at us, trying to time his jump. The boat came in close. Too close. We were maybe 6 feet from the platform, rising and falling with the waves. The timing had to be perfect, or the jump would send him straight into the water between the boat and the platform. If that happened, the next wave would crush him. He jumped. He made it. Barely. He hit the edge of the boat hard, his legs dangling over the side. 3 people grabbed him and hauled him in. He collapsed onto the deck, coughing and bleeding, but alive. "The others," he gasped, "still down there, still in the mechanical level." The captain's voice came over the radio again. "Status of the other 2 missing?" The rigger shook his head. "Trapped. Lower corridor collapsed. I heard them calling out, but I could not get to them. We need cutting equipment. We need..." The platform shuddered again. Even from the boat, we could see it. The tilt accelerated. 7 degrees. 8. "All boats, clear the area," the captain ordered. "Platform is going. Get clear now." The operator did not hesitate. He gunned the engine and we pulled away, gaining speed. I looked back and saw the platform leaning further and further. The lower sections were already half submerged. Water was pouring into every opening, adding weight, pulling the whole structure down. It took 11 minutes for the platform to sink completely. We watched from a safe distance, both boats drifting in the swell, as 12 years of construction and operation disappeared beneath the gray water. The sound was terrible. Not dramatic like in movies. Just a series of groans and pops and the rush of air escaping from sealed compartments. When it finally went under, the ocean closed over it like it had never been there at all. The support vessels arrived 4 hours later. They pulled us out of the lifeboats and took us back to shore. The company put us up in a hotel, gave us trauma counseling, started the investigation. The official report blamed a combination of factors: metal fatigue, inadequate maintenance, cost-cutting measures that delayed necessary repairs, no single point of failure, just a cascade of small problems that added up to catastrophe. 2 people died, the engineer and one of the riggers. They found the bodies 3 weeks later when they sent divers down to assess the wreck, trapped exactly where the survivors said they would be. The corridor had collapsed on top of them. Death would have been quick once the water came in. Quick. That is what they told us. Like it mattered, and like dying fast somehow made it better. I took the settlement, everyone did. The company wanted it quiet. Wanted us to sign NDAs and move on. I signed, took the money, used it to buy a house in Arizona, as far from the ocean as I could afford. But the thing about water is that it finds its way everywhere eventually. Rain sounds wrong now. Too heavy. Too insistent. Every time I hear it on the roof, I think about pressure, about gauges climbing into red, about metal failing and men trapped in collapsing corridors. And sometimes late at night, I dream I am back on the platform, watching the tilt increase, watching the water rise. But in the dream, when I look around, the lifeboats are already gone. The platform is empty except for me. And I know, with absolute certainty, that nobody is coming back. I wake up gasping, check my phone, pitchy ground level, solid earth, miles from any ocean. But the feeling stays. The weight of it, pressing down like thousands of feet of water. Some depths you carry with you forever. The Harrington mine was officially closed in 1987. The company declared it depleted and unprofitable. They sealed the main entrance with concrete, posted warning signs, and walked away. That was 38 years ago. What they did not seal were the ventilation shafts. There were 6 of them scattered across 12 square miles of forest. Just vertical holes in the ground, covered with rusted metal grates. Easy to miss if you did not know where to look. My brother knew where to look. Ethan was always the adventurous one. Urban exploration, he called it. He ran a YouTube channel where he documented abandoned buildings, old factories, forgotten places. It had a decent following. Enough that he could almost make a living from it. Almost. He had been researching Harrington for months, reading old mining reports, studying geological surveys, trying to figure out which ventilation shaft would give him the best access to the intact sections of the mine. He wanted footage, something dramatic, something nobody else had. He asked me to come with him because he needed someone to manage the safety equipment, someone to stay topside and monitor his descent, someone he trusted. I should have said no. We drove out on a Saturday in late October. The ventilation shaft he had selected was deep in the woods, about 3 miles from the nearest logging road. We hiked in with full packs, rope, harnesses, headlamps, first aid kit, communications equipment. Ethan took this seriously. For all his risk-taking, he was not stupid about safety. The shaft was exactly where the old maps said it would be. A 10-foot wide hole in the ground, surrounded by a chain-link fence that had mostly fallen down. The metal grate covering the opening had rusted through in several places. You could see straight down into darkness. Ethan dropped a stone. We counted seconds. 5, 6, 7. Then a distant splash. "Water at the bottom," he said. "Perfect. Means the lower levels are flooded. We will stay above the water line. Much safer." He rigged the descent carefully, anchored the rope to 3 separate trees, tested the knots, checked his harness twice. I watched him work, trying to ignore the anxiety building in my chest. "You sure about this?" I asked. "We have done rappels twice this deep," he said. "This is just a vertical shaft, straightforward. Straightforward if nothing goes wrong." He grinned. "That is what you are here for, to make sure nothing goes wrong." He started down at 11:15 in the morning. The descent was slow. He moved carefully, using his feet to push off from the shaft walls every 10 feet or so. I could hear his breathing through the radio clipped to my vest. Steady, controlled. 20 feet, his voice crackled, then 30, 40, 50. At 70 feet, he stopped. "What is wrong?" I called down. "Nothing wrong. There's an opening here. Lateral tunnel leading off from the shaft. Looks stable. I am going to check it out." That was not the plan. plans change. I mean, the footage from inside the actual mine is going to be way better than just climbing down a shaft. I heard him grunt as he maneuvered himself from the rope to the tunnel. Then his footsteps, muffled and distant. Ethan, stay on the radio. Yeah, I am here. This is incredible. The tunnel is completely intact. Original support timbers still in place. There are rail tracks on the floor. Old ore carts. This is exactly what I needed. I could hear the excitement in his voice. The same tone he always got when he found something good. Something worth filming. How far are you going in? Just a little ways. Want to get some establishing shots? Then I will come back up. I settled in to wait. Pulled out a thermos of coffee. Ate a granola bar. I tried not to think about the fact that my brother was 70 feet underground in an abandoned mine that had been closed longer than either of us had been alive. 15 minutes passed, then 20. Ethan, you about done? Static. Ethan, respond please. More static, then his voice, faint and broken. Problem, can you repeat? You are breaking up. Say again. Collapsed. Way back. My stomach dropped. What collapsed? Are you hurt? Not hurt. Tunnel behind me. Cannot. The shaft. I understood enough. Something had collapsed between him and the ventilation shaft. He was cut off. Okay, I said, forcing my voice to stay calm. Okay, do not panic. Is there another way out? Can you go forward instead of back? Silence. Long enough that I thought I had lost contact completely. Then, checking now. I waited. Each second felt like an hour. I kept the radio keyed, listening for any sound. Breathing. Footsteps. Anything. There is another tunnel, he finally said. His voice was clearer now. He must have moved to a spot with better signal. Heading east. Looks like it slopes upward. Might lead to another shaft or an exit point. Follow it, but go slow. Test everything before you put your weight on it. I know what I'm doing. I know you do. Just be careful. I heard him moving. The scrape of boots on stone. His breathing getting slightly heavier as the tunnel climbed. Then nothing. Ethan? No response. Ethan, do you copy? Static. I gave it 5 minutes, then 10. Then I made the call I should have made an hour earlier. The rescue team arrived 90 minutes later. 4 specialists with proper equipment and experience in mine rescue. They assessed the situation. Each consulted some old maps of Harrington and delivered the news I did not want to hear. The ventilation shaft Ethan had used was not accessible anymore. The collapse he reported had likely destabilized the entire lateral tunnel. Going down the same way would be suicide. But there was another entrance. An old emergency exit on the far side of the mountain. It had been sealed, but they could cut through it. It would take time. We hiked to the emergency exit. It was a horizontal tunnel entrance, blocked by a steel door set into concrete. The rescue team started cutting. The sound of the torch was sharp and industrial in the quiet forest. It took 3 hours to cut through. The tunnel beyond was in worse shape than anyone expected. Supports had failed in multiple places. Water damage. Rot. The rescue leader took one look and shook his head. We are going to need to shore this up as we go. Could take days to reach him safely. Days? My voice came out sharper than I intended. This is not stable. We rush it. We will have more casualties. Your brother is experienced. He has light and he is mobile. Best thing he can do is find a safe spot and wait for us to reach him. They started working. Moving slowly, testing each section, installing temporary supports. I stayed at the entrance, monitoring the radio, calling for Ethan every 15 minutes. No response. Just static. Day turned to evening, evening turned to night. The rescue team worked in shifts, making slow progress into the mountain. They reported back every hour, 30 feet in, 50 feet, 75. They found the junction where Ethan's tunnel intersected with the emergency route at 2 in the morning. The tunnel was empty. No sign of Ethan, no equipment, no footprints in the dust. "Are you sure this is the right tunnel?" I asked. The team leader showed me the map. "This is the only lateral route at this depth that leads east. If he followed the tunnel like he said, he should have come through here." "Then where is he?" "Could have gone the other way at a junction. Could have found another passage. These old mines are mazes. He might be anywhere." They expanded the search, pushed further into the mine, found more tunnels, more junctions, more empty passages. No Ethan. On the third day, they found his camera. It was sitting on the ground in a tunnel half a mile from where he should have been. Undamaged. Still recording. I watched the footage that night in my hotel room. It showed exactly what Ethan had described. His descent down the shaft. The lateral tunnel. The intact mining equipment. Then the moment when he realized the way back was blocked. He stayed calm, checked his options. Started following the eastern tunnel just like he told me he would. The footage showed him walking for about 20 minutes. The tunnel climbed steadily. His headlamp illuminated support timbers, rail tracks, ore carts, standard mine infrastructure. Then he stopped. "That is weird," he said to the camera. The headlamp showed an intersection. 3 tunnels branching off from the one he was in. "These were not on the map," he said. "I'm going to try the middle one. Looks like it heads toward the surface." He walked into the middle tunnel. The footage got shaky. He was moving faster now, almost running. "No," he said, "no, that is not right." The headlamp swung wildly as he turned around. The camera caught glimpses of the tunnel behind him. The same timber supports, the same rail tracks, the same intersection he had just left. He had walked in a circle. "That does not make sense," he muttered. "I walked straight. I did not turn around." He tried again, this time taking the left tunnel. The footage showed him walking for 5 minutes. Then the same intersection appeared in front of him. He ran back the way he had come, tried to find the original tunnel that had brought him to this point. But every passage led back to the same 3-way junction. He tried marking the walls with chalk, followed his own marks. They led him in circles. On the footage, I could hear his breathing getting faster, panic setting in. "This does not make any sense," he kept saying. "This is not possible." He tried the right tunnel, then the middle again, then combinations of all 3. Every route brought him back to the same intersection. He sat down against the wall, tried to think it through logically. That is when he heard the sounds. Footsteps, distant but distinct, coming from one of the tunnels. "Hello?" he called out. "I need help. I am lost." The footsteps continued, getting closer. Ethan stood up, aimed his headlamp down the tunnel where the sounds were coming from. A figure appeared at the edge of the light. It was a man, covered in dust, wearing old-style mining clothes. He stopped just at the threshold of visibility and stared at Ethan. "Hey," Ethan said. "I need to get out of here. Can you show me the way?" The man did not respond, did not move, just stood there staring, and then another figure appeared behind the first, and another, all of them wearing the same old mining clothes, all of them covered in the same thick dust, all of them staring. Ethan backed away. The camera shook violently. "Who are you?" he asked. None of them answered. One of the figures stepped forward, then another. They moved slowly, deliberately closing the distance. Ethan ran. The footage showed him sprinting through the tunnels, the headlamp bouncing wildly, his breathing ragged and panicked. Behind him, the sound of footsteps, dozens of them, all moving in perfect unison. He burst into the three-way intersection again. This time there was someone standing in the center, a woman, same dusty clothes, same empty stare. She raised one hand and pointed down the middle tunnel. We're in the same tunnel he had tried 3 times already. Ethan hesitated. The footsteps behind him were getting closer. He ran down the middle tunnel. The footage continued for another 2 minutes. Just the sound of running. The bounce of light on tunnel walls. Ragged breathing. Then the camera jerked sideways and hit the ground. The image spun, showing the tunnel ceiling. The headlamp rolled away, its beam pointing at nothing. I could hear Ethan's voice. Distant. "No, please, I just want to go home." Then other voices, multiple voices, speaking in unison, words I could not quite make out. The footage ended. The rescue team searched for another week. They mapped every tunnel they could access, used ground-penetrating radar, brought in dogs. They never found Ethan. The mine was officially sealed after that. All ventilation shafts, all emergency exits, everything filled with concrete and marked with federal warning signs. I went back once, 3 months later, hiked out to where the ventilation shaft had been. The concrete seal was solid, professional, no way in or out. But when I stood there in the silence, I swear I could hear something. Distant, muffled, like footsteps on stone, like voices speaking in unison. I left and never went back. Sometimes I still watch that footage, trying to find something I missed. Some detail that would explain what happened, where those people came from, where Ethan went. But there is nothing. Just an impossible maze in an abandoned mine. And my brother, somewhere in the dark, finding out that some places do not let you leave. Some places keep you forever. The Keswick site was not officially a mine anymore. The company called it a reclamation project. We were there to extract residual minerals from the tailings piles, the waste heaps left behind by a century of mining operations. Safer than real mining, they told us. No drilling, no blasting, just processing old material that had already been pulled from the ground. That should have been my first warning. When someone tells you a job is safe, they are usually lying. I was part of a 6-person crew. Small operation. We ran excavators and sorting equipment, separating usable ore from the waste rock. The work was monotonous but easy. No underground component. Everything happened on the surface. The tailings piles covered about 40 acres. Mountains of crushed rock and mineral waste, some of them 3 stories high. They had been sitting there since the 1920s and weathered by decades of rain and wind. Supposedly inert, supposedly harmless. We had been working the site for 2 months when we hit the pocket. Devin was operating the excavator that day. He was pulling material from the north face of Pile 7 when the bucket broke through into empty space. The entire pile shuddered. Rock shifted. A section maybe 30 feet across collapsed inward, creating a crater that went down at least 20 feet. We shut everything down and gathered around the crater to assess the damage. The collapse had exposed something underneath the tailings. A cavity. Too regular to be natural. Too large to be accidental. "Is that a tunnel?" Sarah asked. It was. You could see it clearly now that the waste rock had fallen away. An opening maybe 6 feet high and 4 feet wide, leading back into darkness under the tailings pile. Our site supervisor, Marcus, pulled out the old survey maps. He studied them for a long time, comparing the charts to what we were seeing. "Nothing here," he finally said. "No documented tunnels in this area. The mine workings were all half a mile south." "Then what is that?" Devin pointed at the opening. Marcus did not have an answer. Company protocol said we should report any unexpected finds and wait for the engineering team to investigate. But Marcus was a contractor, paid by tonnage processed. Every day we sat idle was money lost. "Could be an old prospector tunnel," he said, "or maybe a test shaft from before the main mine opened. Either way, it is not our problem. We will cover it back up and keep working." "Should not we at least check it out?" I asked. "Make sure it is stable? If there are more voids under this pile, we could have a major collapse." Marcus considered this. "Fine, quick look. In and out. Just to make sure it is not going to cause problems." He assigned 3 of us. Me, because I'd raised the concern. Devin, because he knew the heavy equipment. And Hector, who had worked as an actual miner before taking this job and presumably knew what to look for underground. We geared up with headlamps and basic safety equipment. No gas monitors, no communication gear, no backup. Just a quick peek to satisfy due diligence. The tunnel was cold. The temperature drop was immediate and noticeable as soon as we stepped inside. Our breath came out in visible clouds. The walls were solid rock, hand-cut probably. You could still see the chisel marks. The tunnel ran straight for about 30 feet, and then opened into a larger chamber. The chamber was roughly circular, maybe 20 feet across. The ceiling was reinforced with old timber supports. In the center of the floor was a shaft, vertical, about 4 feet in diameter, lined with stones. We approached carefully and looked down. The shaft went deep. Our headlamps could not find the bottom. I dropped a rock, counted seconds, never heard it hit. "What is this?" Devin asked. Hector crouched at the edge, examining the stonework. "This is old, really old. Predates the main mine by decades, maybe even a century. Why would anyone dig a shaft here? There was no ore in this area." "Not for ore." Hector stood up and backed away from the shaft. "This is something else." "Like what?" He did not answer. He was staring at the walls of the chamber, when I followed his gaze and saw what he was looking at. Scratches, hundreds of them, covering every surface, not random, not decorative, words, carved into the stone with desperate shaking hands. "Stay away, do not look down. Sealed for a reason, God forgive us." The messages repeated, overlapping, covering the walls from floor to ceiling. "We should leave," Hector said quietly. "We should report this," I replied. "To who? The company? They will just want to cover it up again. Pretend it does not exist." "Then to the authorities. This is clearly—" The ground shook. Not much, just a tremor. But in an unstable underground space, any movement is terrifying. Dust fell from the ceiling. One of the timber supports creaked. "Out," Hector said. "Now." We ran. We made it back to the surface just as a second tremor hit, stronger this time. The entire tailings pile shifted, settling into new configurations. More material collapsed into the crater. When the shaking stopped, the tunnel entrance was gone, completely buried under tons of loose rock. Marcus looked at us expectantly, Well, it was empty, I lied. Just an old prospector tunnel, nothing to worry about. I do not know why I lied. Maybe because the truth sounded insane. Maybe because I was afraid they would make us go back down. Maybe because some part of me already knew that we should have left it buried. We covered the crater with new material and went back to work. That night I could not sleep. I kept thinking about those messages on the walls, about the shaft that went down into darkness, about the way Hector had backed away from it, like it was something alive. I got up at 3 a.m. and looked up the history of Keswick. What I found did not make me feel better. The main mine had opened in 1893, but there had been mining activity in the area long before that. Small operations. Prospectors looking for silver and gold. Most of them failed and moved on. But there was one name that kept appearing in the old records, a man named Elijah Keswick. The site was named after him, but nobody seemed to know why. He had not struck it rich, had not discovered the main ore body, had just shown up in 1867, dug for a few years, and disappeared. The only detail I could find about his work was a note in a territorial survey from 1870. It mentioned that Keswick had been drilling exploratory shafts but had abandoned the site after encountering unsuitable conditions. No explanation of what those conditions were. I tried to put it out of my mind. Told myself it did not matter. The shaft was buried. We would finish our contract and move on. Whatever Elijah Keswick had found or not found was not our problem. Then the accident started. Small things at first. Equipment malfunctions, an excavator that would not start, a loader that lost hydraulic pressure for no apparent reason. We ran diagnostics, made repairs, and kept working. But then people started getting hurt. Devin cut his hand on a piece of scrap metal, deep enough to need stitches. The cut got infected despite treatment. He was out for a week. Sarah twisted her ankle stepping off a loader, a simple misstep. But the x-rays showed a hairline fracture, another person down. Hector started calling in sick, said he was not sleeping well, that he kept having dreams about being underground, about falling into darkness. On day 3 of his absence, Marcus called a meeting. "I do not know what is going on here," he said, "but we are behind schedule and over budget. We need to get this site back on track." "Maybe we should shut down for a few days," I suggested. "Figure out what is causing all these problems." "The problems are bad luck and worker fatigue. Nothing more. We push through. Get this job done." We went back to work. That afternoon, while moving material from pile 7, we hit another void. This one was bigger. The excavator broke through and nearly tipped into the hole. Devin managed to shut it down just in time, jumping clear as the machine tilted at a 45-degree angle. The void had exposed another tunnel, different from the first. This one was wider, more elaborate, and the opening was blocked by an iron grate. The grate was old, rusted through in places, but still intact enough to see that it had been installed deliberately, locked from the outside. Through the gaps in the grate, I could see stairs leading down, stone steps, worn smooth by use, descending into darkness. Marcus wanted to cover it up immediately. "Fill it in. We are not doing this again." But I couldn't look away from those stairs, from the grate that someone had locked, from the void that had been hidden under decades of waste rock. "Someone sealed this deliberately," I said. "Why would they do that?" "Does not matter. Not our job to—" The sound came from below, a low groan, like metal under stress, or maybe like something breathing. We all heard it. We all stood there frozen, listening to that impossible sound echoing up from the sealed tunnel. Then the smell hit us. Decay. But wrong. Too sweet. Too thick. Like nothing I'd ever encountered before. We backed away from the opening, all of us, even Marcus. The groaning continued for about 30 seconds, then stopped. The silence that followed was worse. "Get the concrete truck," Marcus said quietly. "We are filling this in tonight." We worked through the evening, mixed concrete and poured it straight into the void. Kept pouring until the entire cavity was filled, and there was no trace of the tunnel or the iron grate. When it was done, Marcus gathered us together. "Nobody talks about this to anyone, understood?" We all nodded. Iggy, what were we going to say? That we found a sealed tunnel? That we heard sounds from underground? That we smelled something that should not exist? We finished the contract 3 weeks later, processed the tailings, cleaned up the site, left it looking exactly like it had before we arrived. I took my payment and moved to Oregon, found work in construction, stayed above ground. But sometimes late at night, I think about those stairs, about where they led, about what Elijah Keswick found in 1867 that made him abandon his claim, about the messages carved into stone, sealed for a reason. And I wonder if we should have left it that way. If some things are buried for a purpose, if some depths are not meant to be explored, I wonder what is down there, under all that concrete and rock. If it is still groaning in the darkness, still breathing, still waiting for someone to be foolish enough to let it out. I wonder. But I never go back. Some questions are better left unanswered. Some doors are meant to stay locked forever.
Thank you for watching. Please like, comment, share, and subscribe for more stories.